So I think we have some time still for additional questions directed at either us as individuals or as a panel. And we have some as well. Yes.
Just curious what each of the three of you think was the most valuable career lesson from actually executing your projects. It's just a small question.
I can address that first. Just having a plan that you've tried to implement on your own for a 10-year period and developing these partnerships and supporting groups, educational units, just having people come out of the woodwork, being green now with climate change and having things work in the favor of the environment was a plus in Taos because they've been set in their ways for over 100 years. And to see them come out and support a management plan for the first time, I think it's the only one in New Mexico that's actually being moved forward and finalized in the next couple months. So I think that was my learning experience, that you just have to stick with it, ask why, dig deeper, and then raise your limits.
Thinking.
I can
Go ahead.
For me, it was just the importance of developing relationships with people that you're going to be working with in your office or really across the agency. The few people that I was able to really sit down and have conversations with, that was integral to part of my project components when I needed something from them, but also just hearing they do like state implementation calls that I was able to sit in a lot, and you can tell when there was a relationship that had been developed, and the benefits of that, and the ability to work together is so much more, I think, if you have a name to a face and you know that people are invested and care about these resources. And so the more network you can have within BLM, I think the more you can move things around, get things done.
Yeah, I guess for me, it was more of the orchestration piece on how to be patient with people that are very busy, my priorities and everybody else's priority, and it frustrated me at times, and I wanted everything to be done and quickly, and when you're dealing with all these different people, it just doesn't, you just have to be somewhat patient with that process and let the process kind of, it will flow if you don't push too hard, and I think at times I just push, I want to get this done, and I'm in Costa Rica for 10 days, I got a meet, and that didn't always work within the busyness of the people, and then even, there are different cultures in different places, and, it just was really being open to and flexible with a certain amount of change and just going with it.
Butch?
Yes, I wanted to thank all three of you. I think that the presentation today, in terms of what may be happening in the community here in Gunnison, has been very relevant. One of the particular issues is fairly large-scale affordable housing projects, and it might be on BLM land under the Recreation and Public Purposes Act. And it might be nice to involve the people around this. We badly need the housing in the community, and also how to vegetate perhaps and make where the housing occurs really pleasant for people to live in, and then be able to restore it after 25, 30 years under the requirements of that Recreation and Public Purposes Act. So hopefully this kind of information can be shared here within the community.
Thanks, Butch. I think this strategy kind of really helps that process of prioritizing where to put something like a housing, affordable housing. One of the big things that they're doing with it is there's like a regional solar energy zones that they can look at a landscape across, like I think the Colorado Plateau, where there's all sorts of potential to develop large-scale solar, and they now have information across that landscape of, where are some places that we can put that based on where is critical habitat for a species of animal, or what, you know, where are your wetlands and stuff like that, so it, more of an understanding on a landscape scale of where important resources are can help you prioritize where something like affordable housing would go to have the least impact.
So to borrow from Cassidy's theme of building bridges, I found that each one of the presentations had an overarching theme, right, of building bridges. So who must be at the table, right, within your respective projects to build a strong, resilient bridge within each one of your projects thus far?
In my project, it's actually the government agencies that are locally involved. Nothing moves forward in Taos without the approval of the town council. So having them on board, and they don't move forward unless the town of Taos Planning Commission approves it first. So those different steps through my presentations, everybody's aware of the project that I'm doing. So they're all in favor, but they all have to reevaluate it, publicly publish it in papers, and get public information or feedback on it, and then do the next step, do the planning commission, do the town council, and once that's approved, then they can move forward with funding to get this community forester position and the management plan enacted. That's kind of the bridges.
It's an interesting question, because there are a lot of, I've spoken with my community sponsor, and she's been pivotal for this, just because she's so vested in the project. But I think one of the things that she was excited about a central hub of information was that it kind of gets the egos out of things. So whenever people need to refresh their mission or remember their vision, they can go to this one place and say, look, this is what we're doing this together, look at us, rah, rah. So they're really in it together. I don't think there's one person per se, but I think that was an outcome that was very relevant for her, and she thought of that as, the egos can definitely keep the bridges from getting built. So that was important in my project. So.
For me, it's kind of, I'd say all levels of beyond, but it's kind of a chicken and an egg situation of you have this national monitoring strategy that needs additional resources to be allocated from a national level, but you also need buy-in from field offices and monitoring crews and field technicians to understand why we need to use this first, and maybe if there's a great understanding at that level, then they can sort of petition the national level for more resources to do this. But it's kind of which comes first, I guess, in that situation. For me, I kind of wanted to understand more field office requirements and needs, and also the idea of an intern trying to sort of leverage a program lead in Washington was beyond the scope of the project again. And so, but that's, I think, at least from talking to people at the National Operations Center, that was one of the key things that they saw too, is that you have this initiative from a national level, you want people to do something, but you don't even have awareness of it from some people in the national office hadn't even heard of AIM. And so how are you going to generate support and investment in that? You're not even at that level. So.
Picking up on that point, the title of your panel, what holds the three of you together, is Building Social Change Through Education and Communication. Can you talk a little more about how you see yourselves as educators, and about how you've had to become educators in your projects? We tend to think of educators as teachers on campuses, but really to get anything done, you have to be an educator.
It's almost, education and communication are almost the same to me, because I'm not a teacher. And like you're going out and teaching people, I'm more about, I'm not gonna say salesperson, but like bringing voices together. And I think that is education, it's outreach.
Right.
So I think outreach and education are interchangeable within my project in terms of how people are gonna learn. I've created this place where they can become educated as opposed to me going out and teaching them how to do their science in the field. So I was involved in all of that, but more indirectly than like all of it. I don't know. easy for you to know.
That was great, you answered it.
I'll follow up with that because you teach what you best need to learn. And learning through this process has taught me that you really have to know the people you're dealing with, the audience. The audience that we have in Taos is totally different than the environment that's in this classroom right now. They are not very well educated, but they want to be. So you have to take baby steps in educating these cultural people from historical Pueblo Indians that have been there 5,000 years that are just wanting to learn, but they don't know the steps to take. So you really have to take baby steps in your process when you're educating the community.
For me, the educational component was, I think, the most challenging. Coming into this internship, really not even knowing what the assessment inventory monitoring strategy was. So there was a kind of a period where I really needed to understand better, what is the BLM monitoring, how do they do that? And also just that there's a lot of educational tools already out there, I think, that maybe just weren't being utilized. So within this project, one of the main components was just trying to sort of expose these tools that already existed, rather than myself being the one to go out there and create new tools. But again, that's something I hope now that I have a much deeper understanding that I will continue with that.
So across all three of your projects, it seems like the structure for your project was already there. Like a lot of the connections might have already been there, or like there was a very definite need for your project, but it seems like, especially with yours, PJ, like there needed to be a catalyst in order to start the project and really get people to buy in. I was wondering if you could talk about what the catalysts were.
Big trees in mine, and the age of our tree community. Just to give you a little background, cottonwood trees in the landscape area don't usually live to be 100 years old. And ours were all planted, like I said, 1900 to 1930s. A lot of these are failing because the system has changed. The watering system throughout the town is in disrepair. We had acequias that ran from the mountains all the way into the Rio Grande, and they're not working right now. So these large trees, which are water users, are not getting the water they use. They're old, and there's been no management plan at all in the town of Taos. So with these pieces, we have to just put them all together, and the catalyst is hopefully not another tree falling, but having the community. The Taos Tree Board is a big catalyst. We now have a volunteer organization that's a decision-making organization for the town, sanctioned by the town, that can actually support tree care, tree health, and move forward in the Taos community.
I think for me, the need was identified, but it wasn't, the need was promotion. So it was, here's all the information and let's figure out a way to put it together so that it's going to help promote this awesome collaborative effort. And how do you go about doing that? So in terms of catalyst, it was there. It was just figuring out the best way to present and promote something that's already existing that a lot of people just didn't know about, and now they do.
So could you say you were almost like a salesperson catalyst?
Well, I didn't want to say that. I should never have even said that. I'm sure that makes everyone go, sorry, dude. Not sales, but it's just that I think you just have to be a connector and just be able to talk to people and feel comfortable and get their stories, and then try to put their stories together. So it's not even sales, it's just sort of putting it together in a meaningful way that you're messaging them properly. You're saying, you're connecting with them, making sure that you're telling their story correctly, and it's more like journalism, really. So then, you're investigating, and that was something that even when I spoke with my community sponsor, when I went down there, she's like, you just go out and figure it out. She didn't want to give me too much because she didn't want it to be swayed in a certain, she didn't want it to be, she wanted to move me in a direction. She wanted me to create that somewhat myself, and then come back in and see later how that went. So.
for me, again, I think that there was a lot of sort of disparate thoughts and messages that had already been used to communicate this, but they really just needed to be compiled and put on a document that people could look at and say, when we go to a field training, let's remember these are the things that we need to key in on, these are the messages we need to use. And so the catalyst was just that trying to pull all the stuff in together, and until you really put it down and have make people sort of look at it and think of it, it just kind of exists in their head, I think, and oftentimes you just sort of lose that or you forget what you're trying to communicate. So. More questions? Okay.
Any questions or, oh, Bryan?
Sure, so you guys have a like each project had some sort of diverse audience that you're trying to communicate something with. It seems like everybody had some good techniques at getting towards your audience. Can you just speak on some of those techniques and ways that you see that they could possibly be improved, or how you improve them through your project, and just, yeah, touching on those. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Some of my techniques were public meetings was the key technique to get people all in a room, that even they were for or against the management plan, was a challenge for me because, like I said, some of the experience outweighed mine. They had 40, 50 years of landscaping experience, and what I found out is you really have to put on that listening ear, listen to what they say, and then try to address what solutions that they might have for you to move this plan forward. So it was a matter of communication skills, and it was a learning experience for me because I have a lot of education, but to listen to these on-the-ground people that are out in the field and how they do things was a learning experience for myself. So the technique was listening.
So from MEM, I've learned that you're supposed to ask really good questions. And if you ask good questions, you're going to get good answers. And I think that for me, it was more one-on-one interviews. I met with individuals and I met with them on several occasions. And I find that I got better at asking questions that were more direct and could gain a better understanding of the project. For me, I had some difficulty because there was a language barrier, and then a lot of the people I was working with spoke English very well, and so that was great, but I think there were nuances that I missed in it, and in hindsight, I would have liked to go into it with a little more, better understanding how I might overcome that language piece.
And for me, again, I'll say,
No, I'm done.
I think I keep harping on relationships, but the few that I was able to develop with certain audience members that I knew would be sort of reviewing this plan or impacted by it, really provided great feedback, but that I could have done more of that. Maybe there was these weekly implementation calls and monthly state calls with state leads, and so I think that there was a lot, maybe bigger audience that I could have possibly tapped into to try to get a better sense from a more holistic understanding, I guess, of how to effectively communicate the strategy.
Email didn't work for me. I tried. And Skype worked. So just knowing what communication worked for each person, because everyone's completely different.
I think everybody mentioned scheduling and government schedules and how busy they are. I got a really good feeling this person that's been pushing back on this management plan was the Public Works Director in Taos. And he manages all the street trees in Taos. He is now on board because his pushback or his misunderstanding was he didn't like to read emails. So I went over there and had everything hard copy. And he was so thankful that I brought over hard copies so he could read it and mark on it. He said, "Can I mark on these?" And that's how he came aboard to support this management plan. So that was a real plus at the end.
And I would also add, I guess, that my sort of strategy for getting review on these fact sheets was to try to complete them as much as possible and then to send them. And while that worked for a few people, I think that if I had maybe included people more in the development of them, that I would have had a more robust feedback from that, because they would have felt more invested in the content of it rather than just having something shown to them and they have to take time out to review it. So trying to include people as much as possible in the process.
Are there any novel, perhaps unanticipated shifts in responsibility that emerged out of your projects?
No.
Not that I can think of. The only shift I can think about is that out of these meetings, they want me to be the new community forester, because I seem to be the one that's in their face all the time about how to do things correctly.
I'm sort of passing the torch to my community sponsors. They've decided that they want this product as a platform to use, so she'll be taking that on.
I had a similar question about nonprofits, and I'm thinking especially in Cassidy, because of the Rocky Mountain Nature Conservancy or organizations like that that came out of nowhere that you didn't expect in your project that may have been really helpful. Did anything like that happen to any of you?
Not necessarily. The collaborators that I was working with had already been doing work since 2004, so they had this established relationship. And I think it builds on this other question, like how many more people could get involved in that? Well, a lot of people could get involved in that, but I think the collaborators that I was working with were already had a relationship, which means they already also had a history, which was really tricky as well, because people weren't telling me the whole, everything all the time. So,
Right.